Leadership is changing. The last few years have really rewritten what it means to lead and what we value in people who we choose to lead. Jamie Savage has had a front row seat to that shift. She is the founder of the Leadership Agency, and she has helped some of Canada's most ambitious companies place their high growth leaders. I wanted to ask Jamie what she's seeing in terms of the shift in the leadership landscape and what the market is really signaling about great leadership. I'm Emily Madden, and this is the M&L Show. Jamie, hi.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Really, really appreciate it. Let's dive into it. Let's dive into your origin story, actually.
Okay.
I love this one. I know it a little bit, but remind me. Tell me about the Leadership Agency. What do you do at the Leadership Agency? How did it come about? Why do you do it? Why is it important?
So the Leadership Agency, I'll start there. So I founded the company in 2017. I always knew throughout my career that, my passion and what I like to do is working with startups, high growth companies. It's where I started my career. Mm-hmm. So my very first job out of university was with 1-800-GOT-JUNK in Vancouver with Brian Scudamore. And at the time, before it was a billion-dollar global company, it was a high growth startup. Yeah. And so I got to hire 100 people in my first year. And when I got the job, I didn't even know what recruitment was. Yeah. The job was offered to me and I went home and I Googled recruitment. I was
my goodness.
What is recruitment? And I thought I was being hired for marketing. So turns out I'm great at recruitment. And 20 years later, I start my own company after having spent, I think, about 10 years at another agency. I was the first partner. I was the first woman partner of the company. I was the sixth person hired. So it taught me a lot. But what it did is it pulled me out of the startup world. So when I started the company in 2017, it was with one mission, which is still true to this day, which is to help build the most impressive companies of our generation by helping them hire their best leaders.
Yes, amazing.
Thank you.
So reflecting back on this 20-year career in helping organizations, all of that, I know you help high growth companies in Canada and North America. What do you see in terms of a trend that kind of has changed a little bit? Like what did it used to look like? Maybe let's start there.
Sure. Yeah. So the thing with recruitment, I would say, regardless of the industry or the vertical or the environment, is that it never stays the same. Okay. So it's never like this linear process. There's a beginning and there's an end, essentially. You open a job, you make an offer, it gets accepted, and you sort of close the chapter on that. But in terms of recruitment and how, it can be, I guess, classified in terms of like what it is today versus what it was 10 years ago, I would say that the biggest change is that it's continually evolving, right? So it's a practice of a business or of an industry that is fueled by people, okay? So recruitment, if you look at it, you've got people on all ends of the spectrum. So your client, in the case of an agency recruitment environment, is a person. We are people and our candidates are people, right? So it's continuously evolving and the inputs are the people, right? So it's unpredictable completely. Like it's really hard to predict. And it has to be agile to be successful, right? So it can be really hard to measure. You have to be in it and be willing to be incredibly agile. But you also have to be very firm, right? In terms of how you want to approach the market or how you want to position yourself or the opportunity or the company in which you're representing. But I think first and foremost, it's really about agility.
So totally get that on the agility side, but you must, looking back, have a way of describing what were people looking for in a leader? Because you're not just recruiting, right? Like you're placing the heads of organization, like CEOs, like the high impact roles. Like what are boards looking for? What were they looking for?
Yeah, I would say consistently the one thing that's never changed is problem solving.
Yeah.
Right. So a leader, a good leader, and a good board looking for a good leader is looking for someone who can solve problems.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. But in terms of like what they've looked for in the past to what they're looking for today, I think in the past it's been very business specific, right? So what the needs of the business, is, or, what they're looking to accomplish. Now, I think there's definitely the needs of the business, but now I think at the forefront of it all, the needs of the people, the needs of the employees, the shareholders, the stakeholders, what the purpose of the organization is. These are all things that are really layered into the needs and the wants of a board, for example, because those have, risen to the top of what an organization needs to be successful.
Yeah. I have been kind of playing with this idea of leadership myself, kind of thinking about it, because it dawned on me, recently, that the way we think about like management theory, right? Or like what we learn in business school about leadership and how to run an organization is like kind of antiquated. Like it was invented over 100 years ago during, the Industrial Revolution, this idea of like command and control and kind of manage, and like the person who has the steadiest hand or the person who has the most experience is the person who should be leading the organization. And what you're kind of signaling for me is this idea that like, and maybe given the environment that we're in, that we're actually looking for more mission alignment to the organization? Or would you say it's even more individual, a character than that boards are looking for?
I would say it's a bit of both. So I think to take that question and unpack it a bit, I think that there's definitely a mission alignment happening universally.
Yeah.
Right? So any organization, say, for example, on the stock exchange, right? They will all say that they're not there just to make money, and have all the returns. But at the end of the day, we all, they are, right? But what gets them to the point of success and win is when they have a purpose and a mission-driven organization, and that doesn't ever stay the same either, right? Like that's not a linear measurement, because that mission and purpose can change from day to day to some degree. If you're a startup, sometimes your mission that day or in that moment is to stay alive, is to make payroll. But at the end of the day, like to the core of the organization, it's the why that fuels the what, right? And that why that fuels the what, regardless of what it is what will get that organization to success, and then will attract the right leaders to the organization. Because I think more than ever now, good leaders are looking for purpose and mission alignment, right? And that can be very different things to different people. It doesn't have to be that we're all here to make, the earth a better place, environmentally or whatever it may be. It can be something that you personally feel connected to. And, I think in a lot of cases, organizations, larger organizations, startups, it doesn't really matter. But I think when there is a lack of purpose or they're lost in that, what can happen is it's to exist, right? And so you stop and think, okay, so your purpose of the organization is to exist, so you exist to continue to exist. Like, it can go on forever, right? So I think a good leader, if that's the case, will come in and change that. Or if a good organization has that, can attract good leaders.
So is kind of mission alignment a safe bet? Is there such a thing as a safe bet? Like when we're thinking about, okay, like this person, they've got it all on paper, they're a safe bet. And is that what people are even looking for? Or has that historically been what they're looking for?
I think that when it comes to people, there is no safe bet, so to speak, right? I think that hiring and attracting and finding the right leaders, or just leaders in general, to your organization, there's always going to be an element of risk, right? As there should be. You can't really predict exactly what's going to happen. So I don't think there's necessarily a safe bet, but I think if we look at success and, my experience of having done this for 20 years, when there's a good fit is when there's success.
Yeah, so unpack that for me. Like, what signals do you get? Because you're kind of playing this like not observer role. You're obviously a very active participant, but in many ways, like this is a hiring decision that a board or an organization is making that you're coaching them through, but you're not going to necessarily have to kind of live with it. So from your sort of third party perspective, if I could call it that, what signals, that this is going to be, this is going to work?
Yeah, I think the signals is when there's an expectation alignment. So when the board or the leadership team or the executive team has really good clear expectations, and those have been communicated. So the other person, the leader, knows exactly what's expected of them. And then the transparency piece, right? So when everyone is standing on transparency and expectation alignment, that gives everyone the opportunity to make the right decision. So when I see those things being communicated effectively through transparency, or expectations have been, managed properly, and the decision is to move forward, then you know that there is going to be a path to success.
And I think, if I'm understanding this correctly, like for a long time, at least, when we think about placing, what do you call those leaders, like in those roles, high impact leaders?
High impact leaders, material impact leaders.
Material impact leaders, yeah. I know you've used the term before, I just lost it. When you're placing them, I think, if I'm understanding correctly, we're able to kind of say, okay, like this is the system within which you're working. Like here's the expectations of you, here's the role, this is aligned with you in some way, this is yours to kind of helm or take over. And I think that probably makes, like that rings very true to me and makes a ton of sense, especially if you're reflecting back on your career of doing this. I'm wondering where that actually sits now, right? When we look at today, where like we're seeing stats come out that are saying that 85% of jobs in the next decade haven't even been invented yet.
Right.
So how can you, if a leader is supposed to kind of mirror an organization, this is what we're doing, this is where we're going, how do you actually speak to the concept that we don't even actually know what we're building in terms of industries or where they're going to be? And how do you think about leaders that actually will be able to handle that?
It's a great question. And it's something that is really important, because I think this is a moment in time that we can all agree is probably what feels the most unknown to all of us.
Yeah.
Right? Like we could split hairs and talk about, is it the same as when the internet came, or when we transitioned from print to online? We've all been in a very disruptive part of our career, or at some point we've experienced disruption or change. But I think this is probably the most significant change we're all facing or going to face. I think in terms of what to expect or what we can look for in leaders to help us navigate this is, there likely isn't a good leader out there who hasn't navigated some form of major change, right? So I think we're typically, most comfortable when we can do apples to apples, oranges to oranges, right? So it's like, have you been in a situation where you've had to create an org plan for jobs that you've never experienced before? No one's going to have that experience or be able to say yes to that, right? So it feels very uncomfortable and unknown. So we have to find the skill set and the talent that's underlying in being able to do that, right? So looking for leaders who have navigated change.
So it's not, this is an excellent kind of insight. It's not necessarily experience in a particular industry or having done a particular task that is signaling a strong kind of leadership fit right now. And I think we're hearing this everywhere. It seems to be sort of a particular type of skill set that is maybe traditionally kind of what we would have thought of as like soft skills. Is that like fair to say? Like you said, problem solving. Are there others that you're thinking about around there? Like yeah.
That's a great question. I think the number one thing that we are experiencing in terms of what comes next, or how we can visualize what this is going to look like. There's a lot of talk about reskilling. There's a lot of talk about, a year ago we were talking about generative AI, and now we've stopped talking about that. It's, agentic AI. Like, it's already changed. And so I think at the core of that is really the people aspect, like the empathy, the the care around how to not just help an organization navigate what that's going to look like, but help the people within the organization, right? So, there's a lot of talk and a lot of really interesting information out there right now about what workforces are going to look like. Are we even calling them org charts anymore? Because organizational charts have typically been people.
Yeah.
And now we have to think about agentic agents. That's not a person.
Yeah.
So really understanding the, implications and what happens to people and how to navigate the people part of the organization, I think is a skill set that a good leader should have right now.
So there's something that's kind of really interesting to me. And again, it's just drawing on my personal reflections right now of my own leadership. I think that, is it fair to say that when we think about AI and adoption and tools and things like that, it's almost in many ways easier for those who are already in a leadership position to integrate these types of new tools kind of into your work? So for me, I may be able to go back and forth with like a chat bot like 15 times and get some kind of a product that makes sense to me. But I'm thinking I was still doing that before, but I was maybe doing that with a person. Right? And I was going back and forth with maybe a junior team member or somebody and saying, no, it needs to be like this or it needs to be like that. And I'm using me as an example, but I suspect it's happening everywhere. But the issue is that if I stop doing that and or leaders in general, turn to working with these kinds of tools, are we actually, and I'm not talking specifically about job loss or job replacement, I'm actually talking about mentoring and mirroring and like the concept that if leaders are turning to adoption, which we need to figure out, how are we also modeling leadership within an organization to bring up the next generation of human leaders within the organization? Is that something that we should even be talking about?
Right. No, that's a good point. I think that typically when we look at like adoption and, AI and sort of advancing our, footprint in the organization around technology and AI specifically, we're looking at the gains, right? We're looking at, okay, what can the organization gain by doing this?
Yeah.
And by focusing, only on one thing or, just one part of that, there's this whole other piece about like, for example, in recruitment, there is a study that came out, World Economic Forum said that 90% of organizations right now are using some form of AI to screen candidates or to have some sort of representation in the marketplace at that frontline level of recruitment. 90% feels very high. So I don't know if it's 90% of like enterprise organizations or what that capture of measurement is. But what they're
90% of people who do this, recruiters.
Yeah, exactly. So what they're now realizing is that the other part of the equation, which is the candidate, right, knows when they're being screened by AI.
Oh,
so
that's
it
interesting.
Changes their approach completely, right? What happens is they drop the empathy piece. They drop parts of their personality and only apply their analytical thinking because they're being met analytically, right, to some degree. So there's great gains. You can reach more candidates faster. You can convert higher. You can do all these things, right, that equate to a return. But it's fundamentally changing your organization from a people perspective, right? So I think that leaders need to be able to see around the corners in ways that are going to impact the organization fundamentally.
Right. That's an excellent point. There is sort of an immediate kind of maybe productivity gain, but it's incentivizing some kind of behavior that you need to be aware of as well. And so in your experience, like that's very interesting about that. I'd never even considered the candidate reaction to how you might kind of work through AI tools. So are you experiencing that even now? Like are you seeing candidates who are actually considering how AI is going to be factored into? Is that a conversation that's coming up?
It's less of a conversation in the world in which I operate. Yeah. It's more so on the internal talent teams, right? Okay. So my job and my place in the market in terms of like the value I bring and the agency world we're very much still, I mean, trust me, our entire organization is AI powered. 90% of our organization is powered.
The leadership agency
Yes.
is, yeah.
So like from our payments to our content to everything. So we ourselves are powered by AI, but our value and our hold on the market is our connection to people, right? We use AI to help us like do the very typical recruitment things, but where we're seeing it is in our clients. So I was having this conversation earlier today actually about how there's a big gap for organizations to power their teams from a people perspective when there's volume and concentration. So what that means is when an organization needs to hire a lot of the same role, right? That is where AI can play a really important role because it's reps and sets, right? It's an input, it's a return, and away you go. When you have to stay really agile and nimble in your approach and who you want to bring into the organization, AI isn't necessarily going to be what helps you do that.
Okay, so can we talk about the distinction here in terms of the benefit of being agile in hiring a leader? So you talked about that's kind of the major trend that you're seeing and has been for 20 years and doesn't sound like you're anticipating that this agility requirement is going anywhere. Certainly not for kind of human roles that you're looking to fill. So can you just talk to me about agility and like why is that so important when you're looking at hiring these types of roles?
Yeah, I think that why it's so important is because so much of what we're faced with as leaders have little to do with us, right? So when there's an impact to the organization, it's typically something that has, like I said, nothing to do with what we've done or what we can do. We have to be able to overcome it, right? So
like external forces,
whether it's government funding or policy changes or in this case, disruption in technology, things like that, like things that maybe we've experienced it before, but we can't stop it from happening.
You put it on a SWOT map, but it's kind of, it's out there.
Exactly. So you have to be able to quickly, overcome that. And I think that there's not been a generation or a time in the past 20 years that I've been a recruiter that we haven't been faced with something. I mean, in the last 5 years, globally, we've had a pandemic, we've had workforce management changes. 90% of the world was work from office. And now I don't even know what the measurement is in terms of like where people work or how they work, but it's changed, right? And I don't think 10 years ago we would have seen this coming. Yeah. So I think agility is definitely underpinned in terms of being able to overcome that successfully.
To all of those things. I think like the leadership as a role, the leader of an organization as a role, is it still something that we're like obsessed with, that people are looking for? Like the distinguishing indicator of a leader has a leader, and I don't believe this is true, but there's kind of a bit of the talking head, sort of the piece, but who's actually doing the work, who actually knows the DNA of the organization. Is that still the same person as it used to be? Has that been fractured? Is it more of a representative? Why is, humor me, why is hiring a leader such a critical thing that we do, that there's actually entire industries like yours there to actually support that particular decision?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that it goes back to our earlier part of the conversation around like purpose and mission, right? So I think as individuals, I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can talk about, someone's purpose, right? Whether it's cultural or religion or interest, right? Like, but in terms of like this, this conversation, I think that purpose and mission, we often look to somebody or something for that, right? In alignment, right? Where it's like, if I'm going to be working with you, do we feel connected on some level, right? And I think that a leader signifies, is the signal of that. And I think that when you look at an organization, whether they have a board or they have investors, there's always going to be somebody that is collectively leading, right? On some level. And I think that probably isn't going to change. I think it's changing always. Like, for example, 10 years ago, we never had a chief purpose officer. We never had a chief revenue officer, even like a chief sales officer. Like that was typically a chief marketing officer that sort of oversaw the entire revenue ecosystem. And now we're seeing chief customer officers. And so I think that leadership, is important for the customer, but it's very important for the people of the organization as well.
So are you describing, Jamie, that like even the titles of those roles or the people in those roles is giving purpose to facets within the organization? If I am working with the chief revenue officer, I recognize that my role in this organization is all related to this particular, like in this case, like driving revenue, right? And so you're going to have all these different facets underneath it. But are you describing the language as a way for people to see themselves in their leader and in their company's mission? Or is it just the same job with a different title? Like, is it really different, or are we just talking differently about it? And is there like even a difference?
Yeah, I think there are differences. Absolutely. Like I think that, say if we look at chief revenue officer, for example, how we obtain revenue and how we, meet the needs of our customers, that's changed, right? Like, you think that retail, for example, is a great one. Is 20 years ago, we didn't have e-commerce, right? So the needs of our customers have changed, the needs of our employees have changed. And so so the business is changing because the market's getting more complex. Yeah, like things will continuously, evolve. But I think having a leader of that specific, department or division or group hasn't changed.
Okay. And I really do like the point, I hope I haven't missed it completely, that like that leader is the human element. It's I don't know, inspiring, is that the right word? Mm-hmm. The organization, you see yourself as that leader. And so therefore you want to kind of feel a part of it. And that's kind of why it's not just the work is changing, but the actual kind of words and vernacular around that. It's actually an interesting element to consider. Okay, so we're talking about agility. I kind of think about adaptability a lot, right? Like learning, changing, acquiring new skills. It's not necessarily that you're like completely taking a different direction. You're adaptive, right? You're adding new things. Are boards and organizations like recognizing and valuing that? Or would you say that when we think about I mentioned kind of management theory and the old kind of trusted kind of predictability, stability, like especially in many for-profit organizations, you still have a bottom line to the shareholders, right? And so predictability and kind of steady growth, et cetera, is that still the gold standard? Or are we really looking now for leaders who are just a bit more adaptive and able to grow with the times? Like, has that changed at all in terms of the current environment?
I think the consistent, the underpinning is still the original. Yeah. Right? Purpose. It's to grow the business, to, be profitable, and to, satisfy the needs of the board or the shareholders, stakeholders, investors, whatever it may be. That I don't think is ever going to change, right? I think that is what we all strive for from a business perspective. I think that what we're seeing now from, the lens that we get to look through is interesting, because we're seeing a lot of boards needing to change. Okay. And intersecting with the wanting to change. So there's a very big difference, right? So between boards or executive leadership teams that need to change, that look the same in terms of the structure and...
Can you unpack that for me a little bit?
Yeah. So a lot of boards or a lot of executive teams or whatever is the underpinning management or overarching management of an organization, that can look a lot like your alma mater. Okay. Right? You see yourself in your peers, and there's a lot of similarities in terms of skill set, backgrounds, experiences, and so on, right? So it can be a very singular thought process and result, right? That isn't going to have the same result that it used to have. And we're seeing that, right? Where there was always sort of maybe the need to change, but the want wasn't necessarily there. We're seeing now the want to change. We want to change. We want to break free to some degree of the old guard.
Like the old playbook is not working anymore,
the old guard,
and we're
the
starting
old
to be
playbook.
aware of it.
Let's try something new. And we get to be a part of that.
Yeah.
You know, for example, like when we get brought into organizations or when we win RFPs or bids and we're up against really large agencies, global agencies, we're not winning because we're the biggest team or because we have a global presence and office in every country. It's because they see the want in us, right? The want to change and the ability to do that and the result that you get when you do it.
Yeah. So we've been, and I've kind of touched on it a little bit, we've been exploring this idea of like adaptive human potential at Magnet, this idea that there's something that is kind of uniquely human about being able to integrate and adapt and change and learn new things. And I think we no longer can be looking at our leaders to be the person that knows the most, right? Like we have tools that know more than any human can know, right? So it's almost like you have to be looking at the organizations who have the leaders who can learn the most, who can learn the fastest, and also bring their whole organization kind of along for that. So when you look ahead, what do you see in leadership over the next few years in terms of skill set and mind frame?
I think the ability to say, I don't know. Okay. I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think that we all have to get really comfortable in hearing that.
Yeah.
Because the expectation for anyone, like you said, to know everything is completely unrealistic. Yeah. And I think that when someone thinks that they do know everything, that's very unrealistic, right? So I think there has to be space held for the I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think Obama said it and said it best. Get good at getting it done, right? Okay. And that's all it is.
Yeah.
If you don't know, then find out.
Yeah.
Figure it out, get it done.
Yeah. It ties back to that very kind of entrepreneurial way of thinking. And it's a bit of a theme that I'm sort of exploring this season is entrepreneur skill like a mindset, or is it actually something that's teachable? Can you get people comfortable with, you said problem solving is kind of the one big sort of skill set. There's also kind of, comfort with risk and being able to learn. And as you said, just get it done and be comfortable with saying, I don't know. I really like that. Mm-hmm. If you had to pick one trait from your perspective with staying power, what do you think that would be for leaders?
I think momentum is really important. And what I mean by that is being able to move forward without having all the answers. Like you're just never going to have all the answers or all the information. But moving forward and having momentum and someone who can create momentum and someone who can thrive with momentum is really, really important, if not the most important, because when you're stuck and you stay the same and you don't move, then you will just get left behind.
Yeah.
No matter what. Like that, I think that's physics.
Yeah.
But so I think that I would say someone who can move forward.
Who can move forward.
And
how do you see that just like from a national perspective? Like, do you see that forward momentum as part of Canada's national identity right now? Or do you think that, we've got some work to do. We need to kind of think about getting a bit unstuck in the way we do things?
It's a great question. And very good timing to ask that question. I think that, Canada, I think, can oversimplify and overcomplicate at the same time.
Oh my goodness.
I really think that, if you look at Canada's organizational landscape, right? 98% of people are employed by a small business in Canada. It's a really big number.
It's huge.
And at the same time, those small businesses, I think get oversimplified in terms of for example, there was a lot of conversation around AI, digitally adopting and transforming. People were saying things like, well, my son and his hockey team figured out how to use AI to fundraise for their hockey.
Yeah.
So why can't a small business, why this organization can't do it? And that's oversimplifying it, because what people don't realize is that to digitally transform and to go through any sort of form of adoption, especially as a small business, that's really hard, right? It's a lot of money, it's investment, it's risk, it's time, it's all those
Change
things.
management, everything. Learning.
Exactly, right? So, and then on the other end of it, I think we are overcomplicating it to some degree, right? Where it's like, it's also not that complicated to do it. So I think that Canada is a wonderful country, and has a lot of opportunity. But I think, going back to my original point, overarching skills, moving forward and doing so at a pace that makes sense and having momentum, Canada lacks there.
Well, fantastic, Jamie. I generally don't end episodes on Canada lacks there, but I actually do feel that your answer gave us all of the pretty stuff on the front end. And Canada is a wonderful country, but I know that there is a lot to do in terms of the momentum that we're putting into the pace of change that we are trying to manage. So thank you so much, Jamie, for the conversation, for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.